Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, May 13th Select Board meeting. We're going to have a roll call to attendance.
Andrzejczyk here.
Hardikoff here.
Gibson here. Sakosha here. Can I entertain a motion for non-public?
I move to non-public session for personnel, reputation, and land, whatever RSA that is.
I would second that.
Okay, roll call.
Andrzejczyk, yes.
Hardikoff, yes.
Gibson, yes. Sakosha, yes.
Okay, you're live.
Welcome. We're just entering. Good evening. Welcome to the May 13th, 2024 Select Board meeting. We're just re-entering after non-public. I'd like to make a motion to seal the non-public material for 6 months for personnel and land.
Make that motion.
Second. Roll call.
Manshirk, aye.
Sakosha. Okay. I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Agenda review and approval. Motion to.
One thing to add.
One thing to add.
One thing to add, old business, recreation project renovation.
Okay.
Oh, that was in there, okay.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended. Second. Gannon, roll call.
Aye.
Rob. Gibson, aye. Sakosha.
Capiello, aye.
Perfect.
Oh, she's
Yep.
on. All right, public comment. We have a lot of visitors in here tonight. Please keep it respectful. It's not a two-way dialogue between the select board and you. Each public commenter has 3 minutes. So if anybody online or in person would like to come up, feel free. Okay. Come on up.
You can either go to the podium or here. Just make sure the little red light around the neck is green.
And then please state your name and address before you speak.
Jake Aricolo, resident of 130 Small Road, Barrington, New Hampshire. Speaking on it was the improvement of the boat launch was brought forward. Be honest with you guys, I found about it more recently than not. It's like busy, but regardless of that, I just want to make sure that we're calling it all on the same understanding of the implications of putting this plan forward and kind of what that does thematically to the body of water and kind of what has happened in other bodies of water when you do make improvement, right? So I went on last night and just a simple Google search, you can see that there's probably close to 100 bodies of water that have been infected with milfoil over the causation of probably public access. That is at least a correlation to that problem. And I think that, as a resident, I've had no issue getting my watercraft in and out of that area for, the 30 plus years that my family's done. I think that, in all reality, just because somebody gives you money doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and spend it. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing here is that we've got this grant, we've got a ton of money, let's make, an improvement. And it's really, I want everyone to carry some forethought into the process of, what happens down the line when you put up a ramp of that size and you increase the roadway and, now that you basically illustrated a giant vacancy sign lit up in neon for other towns to come around. And I want to say, what is the repercussions of somebody coming, using the waterway, which they have every right to do so, but, they leave and we're left with the mess. And, from what I understand, the state only can remedy the issue for a year. If it does, in fact, milfoil does in fact take place in the lake, it's like, well, then what? Then what happens? The Lake Association has to pony up for it. It's very small. It's a pond. There's not enough funds coming in to ever battle that. And if anything could be a clearer example, I mean, Swains, it's like how many of us would volunteer to go jump in there and have a good time? It's like it's a lot, and it looks like a lot. So I don't know. I just want the select board to really weigh this decision heavily on the impact that it'll have on residents, the impact it'll have on people coming there. People love Ayers Lake. They love Ayers as a swimming spot, as a watercraft recreation area, and I would hate to see it get ruined for future generations because I've enjoyed it for my past 30. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Dan Cassidy, resident on Ayers Lake. I just give a couple of handouts to the folks on board.
Sure.
Can we enter that into the record?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you send it to me electronically, we'll get a good copy attached to the minutes, opposed to a
I don't have
scan.
copy to give Joyce, seeing how she's remote, so.
Right.
Thank you.
I'll leave an extra for her.
Hear me all right? So I've been a resident on Ayers Lake for 20 years, and I'm currently an alternate on the Barrington Conservation Commission, and I coordinate the Weed Watcher program on Ayers Lake. At the April 25th Barrington Conservation Commission meeting, the commission voted to not endorse the plan as presented by Connor at that meeting. There were 4 reasons that I'd like to highlight. One was there was a lack of permanent erosion control in the plan. There were comments about the size of the ramp, comments regarding parking in the area, and the possible introduction of invasive species, which has gotten a lot of conversation lately. I'd like to make some comments. If the plan were approved, and these are comments from me personally, I'm only speaking for myself here. I would suggest the following design changes. On that sheet that I handed out, if you flip over to the map side, I'm suggesting that you move the parking area north on Daniel Cater Road closer to Pond Hill Road. The shoulder is quite wide on the north side of the road there, and it's quite straight. It's a little bit away from the lake, which requires some walking, but this would allow you to maintain vegetation along the road, eliminate widening, and not require permitting from shoreline protection for that part of the plan. I would suggest that you still limit the number of parking spaces provided with signage posted at that location and limit it to 3 boat trailers. And this is consistent with the parking provided in the proposed plan. I would also suggest that the plan show drainage controls to intercept runoff away from the ramp, which I believe is required for DES approval. There's also on that handout an educational kiosk and cleaning piece of equipment that I would like to ask the board to approve as part of the plan.
We will take a look at it, but your 3 minutes is up.
Okay. There'll be another public comment later in the meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Comment? Anybody online? Nope. Come on up.
Allie Gard, 335 Isaac's turn. I am going to be honest and have missed previous discussions about anything that's taken place about this boat ramp, but I want to express some concerns on the other side. It seems like many of the folks here are against the public plan. However, I want to make sure, being on the other side of the lake, we don't have any other access point to get our boat in. We purchased the property 4 years ago in 2020 under the premise that somebody on the other side of the lake had a boat access for us. And come to find out last year when we actually purchased a boat, that was no longer the case. That agreement fell out somehow. I think it was with the campground. So on the flip side, we want to make sure that we still have some sort of agreement in place to know that we're going to be able to get our boat in. We're not taking it anywhere else. We also want to know if they do end up limiting power boats or removing motor boats, which I did see in some of the plans. If this was to not go through, it would devalue our property. I'll be quite honest with you, and that's a concern as well. I'm actually for the public launch. I think when you look at the bodies of water that exist in New Hampshire, I think Ayers Lake is not something that's going to be a destination for a lot of people. I grew up on a large lake. Large lakes tend to be it. So I'm not as much concerned, but I do understand the concern of bringing in milfoil and some of the other invasive species. So I understand that as long as that's mitigated. So that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else in studio or online?
Diane St. Jean, Small Road. I wanted to read something, but I don't know if you got the message from Pete Cruz, our president. So if you didn't receive an email from him, I'd like to read this because he's been traveling and he got back late last night. So
I haven't received
okay,
anything.
so I'll read the response.
Is this from the Lake Owners Association?
Yes.
Okay, and has the association voted on it, or is it this individual?
What we have talked about was a discussion among the board, and these were two questions that Connor posed to us. So I'm going to read the questions and I'll read the answers from the association board. Would the Ayers Lake Association be willing to fund the project scope desired by the association? This would be a 4-foot to 6-foot ramp with the docking structure. The answer is the proposed scope. The project scope proposed for funding by the Ayers Lake Association, as described by Connor McIver in our May 8th, 2024 meeting, includes the docking structure that is in the current plan and a 4 to 6 foot wide boat ramp. The current plan calls for a 12-foot wide ramp. Connor estimated the cost at $75,000 to $80,000. The Ayers Lake Association is unable to provide that funding. Second question, RSA 270 includes many lake-specific restrictions, including on boats and boat activity. Is the Lake Association interested in working with the town to pursue state legislation to impose boat restrictions on Ayers Lake? And the answer to that is the Ayers Lake Association is not going to pursue boat restrictions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Come on up. I think.
Hi, I'm Michelle Meister. I live on Isaac's Turn. I'm just finishing up for Dan because he ran out of his 3 minutes. So I just wanted to read the rest for you. Suggest the select board sponsor a warrant article to fund a capital reserve fund for invasive treatment for Barrington's water bodies. Amy Smagula, who is the exotic species control coordinator, commented regarding Swain's practice in 2023, and we significantly reduced variable milfoil in Swain's Lake so that it no longer covers 70 acres. I did still find some milfoil this season near the launch, so it is still there, and the lake will be under active management for years to come. While our goal was eradication, it's a term I don't often use because it often proves infeasible. We can maintain low densities of infestation with a lot of work, time, and money. The best thing to do is prevent a new infestation or find it early rather than get into a long-term management scenario. I did share with Connor some recommendations for mitigating risk, including signage, informational kiosk, and lake hosts. So that's just finishing it for Dan.
Thank you.
Awesome.
If you're
Anybody
online,
else?
you can raise your hand. Looks like staff and select person Capello.
Still have somebody with, still have time.
All right, we're going to go ahead and close public comment. And that's going to bring us to public hearings and invited guests. School liaison report. Hello, hello.
There's only one, but I have a mom voice, so I feel like I can talk.
Or you can grab the other one. I can grab it for you.
Oh, is it wireless?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yep. Either way.
I'm trained to not use. Yeah, I'm trained to not move anything around too much because of the wires. Hello, thank you for having us here and always making a space for us. One exciting thing I wanted to mention was up and coming, we have coins for convention for some of our students. So I wanted to share exciting news that two of our citizens here in town, Alex, had at the elementary school received nominations to attend the National Invention Convention. So for those in the audience who don't have elementary age children yet, every year we at the elementary school hosts an invention convention. It's goes to the state and then also is done nationally. And there's a theme to it, but it's you have to qualify at your local level, then at the state level, and then be nominated to go to national. So we had two students go to national, which is being held in Dearborn, Michigan. Yeah, so it's super, super exciting. So the one invention was Comfort Crutches 2000. And so think that's great. It's just basically crutches that are specially designed for comfort and for younger people's use. And then the other was the Stinkpator 5000. I don't know what the previous versions were, but as anyone else who lives in Barrington knows, stink bugs tend to be very prevalent, especially in this time of year. And it was a makeshift model that sucks the stink bug up, but also the scent too. So you can safely collect them and then put them back outside. So I thought that was very, very nice. The students have worked really hard on their inventions and be attending that national convention June 5th through 7th. But you can imagine, as all of us have been probably invited or attended national conventions, they're really expensive. They don't cover any of the costs for the students. There's no grant opportunity. And there's actually a fee just to register, even though you've qualified and placed. And so the school board at the most recent meeting elected to, out of our school board discretionary fund, to take money to cover their registration fee, because of course we want to support our students. And then I know our local PTO at the elementary school is going to be donating some funds to help with their travel costs. But that still won't cover probably all of it, because their whole families want to attend, of course. So to help these students out, there's a coin collection box located at the elementary school lobby. And if anyone out there is interested in helping to support these kids, they're happy to accept that change and put it to a really good use. So I have a flyer, but I realized after you said that for the other person who spoke that a digital would be better, because we'd love to promote it. So I will have Deanna contact you with a digital.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I know Rick and I wanted to mention the high school community forum that we had. And I just spoke for a while, so I'll let Rick talk about it.
So the high school forum was held on Thursday night, 6:30 to 8:30. Very interesting. There was about probably 50 or 60 town residents there. It has been recorded, so you can go on to the school website and view it. Interesting to look at it from the perspective, and they talked a little bit about, like when I was in school, I had more than a one-room schoolhouse. But anyway, we had a limited number. The schools had to have enough seats for every kid because kids didn't move around too much. So you went from class to class, and the question came up. They actually asked, a parent asked Dover, what happens if the kids are in school and all of a sudden the school becomes overcrowded again, and you have to limit the number of students. And Dover has about 1,300 kids in the school now, and they project that they can handle past 2,000 kids. And that the way the school is, where the kids move around and are actually leave the building for some of the programs, it's not necessary today to say if we're going to have 2,000 kids here, we have to have 2,000 seats. So that was pretty interesting to me. But they talked quite a bit about the programs they offered, as did Co-Brown and Oyster River. And the school district has a survey that we would like interested parties to participate in on what you think you'd like to see on the school choice. You want to elaborate a little more on that?
Oh, sure. So every time our contracts come up, so I should say the three schools of record nope, not of record. The three schools of choice are Dover High School, Oyster River, and then Co-Brown. With Dover and Oyster River, we do have a contract, but with Co-Brown, we have a memorandum of understanding, so it's not technically a contract, but Dover and Oyster River will be coming up for renewal at the end of next year, and then Co-Brown the year following, I believe. But so any time that we come up to this, it's just been a while since those two were 10-year contracts.
Oh, they're 10-year.
Yeah, they were.
So 10 years.
They were. Yep. So it's been a while, so I think that people's memory just needed to be a little bit refreshed. I think there was some confusion about what the purpose of the meeting was, and there were some rumors about, are we looking to eliminate one of the schools? That is not the case. As a reminder, we school board members, just like you, serve our community. So if our community is saying they want the three choices, that's obviously what we would support. So just to clear the air there. And so we'll be taking that feedback about which schools we do want from a community standpoint to support, and bringing those to contract negotiation discussions. We explained a bit about how that works too. I think that unless you're in love with the school, like, and the process behind the scenes, like Rick and I are involved in now, you might not know what goes into making these decisions, which that was my biggest takeaway, is how much the community might not understand maybe what goes on the ballot when they vote for it, or how the process works. So there is a lot of confusion about, do I have to pay for tuition if my child chooses one of those schools? What do you mean by per pupil tuition? That's to the taxpayer, not the individual family. Concerns about, like Rick mentioned, overcrowding. Do we guarantee a seat? We do. Those are in those contracts, that we have guaranteed seat numbers, so that your student at no time ever will be pulled from a school because they've reached capacity or anything like that. And those were all kind of ironed out in the questions, but I know only certain groups get to read those or watch those. So I hope that this message will get out to even more people, that the school board broke up the contract negotiations between our board members, and then we go back and forth with the schools to discuss, but there's a lot of discussion over that next year. It will come to public comment and discussion in our regular meetings throughout next year, and then it ultimately comes to a vote when it comes to the warrant article. So it's not going to be a surprise. It will be discussed many, many times, and we'll keep the select board, of course, informed of that.
Excellent. Voter education's huge.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fear and concern, which I get, but that's almost, I take it as good because it means people care about it, they're interested in it. And a key takeaway, I think, for us is just making sure that people really understand the process before it comes up to decision making. Maybe more education in the future, slowly, where it's more absorbed, can be better absorbed, would be better for the future. But
absolutely,
always good to learn as we go through the process.
All righty. Well, if that's all, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Next up for a public hearing is the Pond Hill Culvert Project Engineering Grant acceptance. So with that, I'm going to open up public comment in regards to Pond Hill Culvert Project Engineering Grant acceptance. Is there anybody in studio or online that would have a public comment towards this project? Okay, we're not seeing anybody in studio online. We're going to close public comment. And any discussion from the board?
You can make a motion.
Joyce?
I think it sounds good. I'll make a motion to support this.
Okay, do we have a second?
So I'm going to make a detailed motion if I could.
Okay.
And then maybe we could ask Joyce to second it. Make a motion to accept and expend $40,324,000 in grant dollars, and to authorize up to $13,000 from the Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve to fund the 25% matching requirement. Would you second that, Joyce?
Yes, I would.
Okay, roll call.
Sure.
Hardikoff, aye?
Gibson, aye.
Sakosha.
Gabriello, aye.
And should I further make a second motion in reference to this? So to make a motion to accept the terms of the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities BRIC BRIC Grant Program as presented in the amount of $40,324 for project scoping for 3 undersized culverts under Pond Hill Road and Daniel Cater Road. Furthermore, the board would acknowledge that the total cost of the project will be $52,925.25, in which the town would be responsible for the 25% match, approximately $12,601.25.
Second. Roll call.
Aye.
Hardikoff, aye?
Gibson, aye.
Gabriello, aye.
Sakosha.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Next up is finalized library project financing and expectations and project reporting.
So we have the library trustee chair and I understand the treasurer now of the library trustees and the president of the foundation. You can grab a chair, pull up a third one if you'd like. One from the audience is fine. So select board members know at our strategic planning session, we talked about some of the funding decisions that would need to be made relative to the new library project, where exactly the lines would be drawn between the bond funds and the donated funds and the capital reserve funds and any outside grant funds. And so the select board, and I've copied in it, I have copied in my town administrator report the minutes from that session where the select board evaluated and kind of gave its proposal of where some of those lines should be drawn. The library trustees have prepared a document which addresses funding and a few other topics that the select board discussed, talking about the funding, what funding should be used, how, and then on the back of that page, some of the approval and review process for the contracts, change orders, payments, and progress reports to the select board. I think the real meat for the discussion tonight is the discussion about funding and funding sources, where those lines are going to be drawn. The select board, the biggest decision the select board has to make is on June 17th, the town will have to finalize the amount that we will borrow from the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank. And this funding source is important for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to be the lowest interest rate we can secure at probably around 3.5%. It will be for 20 years, and most importantly, it will not be eligible for prepayment. So however much we borrow, municipal bonds are low interest rate because they're stable. That is as good as gold for 20 years. That's going to be the debt schedule. So the select board will need to make that final decision at their June 10th meeting, but we should establish a mutual understanding between the trustees and the select board as soon as possible so we know where those lines are to be drawn. So some of the pertinent information which matters, the total project cost is $3.6 million. At the time that town meeting approved the project, there was a promise of cash on hand, $327,000 from the foundation, the fundraising arm of this project, which has been active for many years. In addition to that, I asked the foundation president, who's here with us, for an update on those numbers kind of to this point. And this is as of May 7th. So they have $385,676, excuse me, cash on hand, and included, not included with that number is $20,000, which was placed as a deposit for the purchase of the building. So the total is a little over $405,000 of cash on hand. In addition, there are certain grants and other pledges which are either commitments to fund the pledges or grants that they're pursuing that are outstanding. I understand the number, and this isn't in my report, but I understand the number of pledges to be about 65,000, but there's some concern that they'll be able to collect a big chunk of that for some extenuating circumstances. So you have the materials. We're looking for determination about donations and pledges, about how much that bond amount should be. We're looking for a determination about the capital reserve, which has funds availability. We'd originally talked about using that to buy down the bond. The trustees would like to see that as a separate project account, either in addition to the project or for longer term projects.
The balance of that right now?
25,000.
25,000. Thank you kindly. And then the determination about one of the options we talked about the strategic planning session was borrowing a portion of the debt from a local bank that we could prepay. So if there was a pledge amount of $75,000 that we wanted to borrow from a bank, and then if those pledges came in, we could pay it off. We could pay off that debt, prepay early to not incur as much long-term debt. And if all of them didn't come in, we would just carry that debt for the 10 years or so before it would be paid off. So I think that's probably enough introduction. Do you want to give Library Trustee Chair a chance to chime in on additional details and then some discussion?
Well, and I
turn that microphone towards you a little bit. Yep.
I noticed in the report that the town administrator provided, your detailed report, it was an earlier version of my sort of draft summary of the arrangement. At least it was dated 3/27. I was just looking at it online.
Okay.
So I don't know whether the select board has seen my update, which is when I really addressed the suggestion about the capital reserve. And so, Connor, do you know if if the board had a chance to see that, or
They
no?
have the updated document. I don't know if it's just the title that's different, but the plan for the capital reserve.
Well, I'll just go ahead and speak while Connor's
Yeah,
looking at that.
to use that for the, I'll pull it up on the screen regardless.
The 25,000 is not a huge amount of money. Obviously, every penny counts these days. So it, as far as the bond itself, it's not a significant portion of that. My thought had been, certainly as we go along through this project, if we ran short of money, it would be helpful to have those funds available. They were approved by the voters separately, obviously, over the years for construction. So the construction part is appropriate. The other thought I had is, and Connor and I have talked about this as a future consideration, is this is going to be obviously a separate building. We agree that the expenses related to this building should be kept separate, as opposed to in a general town building fund, because it is specific to the library. So naturally, I'm already worried about any major expense that might come down the pike. The one that came to mind that I described in my notes was when we were looking at the building and looking at the parking lot of the building, which our plan and money is in the budget to basically do a patch and top coat, not, is that what you call it? A ceiling of it. So it's not a major expense. But the road agent, when he looked at it, he made an estimate on what that would cost, but he said that will buy you maybe 5 more years of use with that. Rebuilding the entire parking lot would cost $100,000 according to his estimate. So we're going the I hate to say cheaper route. We're going with, let's extend the life of it. Maybe it'll last even longer than 5 years. But let's say in 10 years, it really needed to be rebuilt. That's a big chunk of change. So we ought to be saving for any kind of expense like that. We did include reshingling the roof in the project. So that's not, when that gets done as part of this project, we won't have to worry about that for quite a while. And hopefully, the other big expense with this building is the HVAC system. We know that of the 5 units, we're hoping we can renovate or refigure the service so it doesn't really require 5 furnaces. 2 of them can be serviced and their life extended for another 8 to 10 years. 3 of them must be replaced. So again, when I think 8 to 10 years, that would be another big expense. So the value of having a capital reserve ultimately, where we put aside, I don't know how many dollars, $20,000 a year or something like that, to build that fund up to the point where it just gets to an appropriate level for the building. My thought had been that would also be a good use for those funds, assuming we don't need them in the construction.
And one concern I shared with the library trustee chair is the capital reserve as it was established probably has too much of a limited scope to allow that. So if we were looking to take those funds and have them be for future capital projects, like paving or something like that, that would have to be a close and reopen at a future town meeting. Yep. So the purpose as established is the design, planning, and construction of a library and community center, including but not limited to building construction, site work, architectural fees, engineering, permitting, inspection, furniture, commissioning, and other expenses to occupy the building. So I think that really gets us to occupying the building, and it could be anything to occupy the building.
And we would need a new capital reserve brought before the residents for them to ensure that they have these future dollars. Can you give us some history on the capital reserve? Was it 50,000 and 25,000 that went into that? Over
25,000, then 20,000, okay, and then 25,000. Right? It started in
Something
20.
Like that.
Okay. It was reduced to 20,000 one of the years. And yeah, so one of the things that we talked about at the strategic planning session is one of the talking points for promoting the capital reserve over the years was just like we do with a fire truck capital reserve, it's good to save for things. And there was discussion about using the capital reserve to reduce the total project cost. And that's where the select board landed at the strategic planning session, that maybe the best way to use the capital reserve is to reduce the total bond cost, because that was an item that was talked about through promoting the capital reserve contributions over the years.
So really, as I see it, there are three options. One is, as Connor just described, using those funds to apply to the budgeted amount that is listed in the 21. A second option is to consider those funds for the purpose only of construction, but in addition to the 3 point, get the glasses on.
Well, the 3.3 million for the library
Right,
project, right?
for the 3.3 million. And that third option was potentially, unless something came up that we needed those additional funds in addition to the 3 point whatever million, that we would, those funds obviously could be available for the current project if for some reason we ran over budget. When I say run over budget, we're not going to run over budget, but it just means right now what we're going to do is if we need more money for the major renovations, we're not going to be buying furniture.
What's the contingency fund? Remind me of the contingency on the total project. Is
There's a
it
$200,000 contingency.
Okay.
And what I'm told by the construction management firm is we will have, well, the plan is going out to bid for subcontractors in September in order to be able to start the construction itself in October once we've had a closing on the building, and obviously when it's currently really actually ours to start working on. As they move through that project and that construction, obviously we will see how those numbers are going. If we need change orders, if there's been, who knows what the inflation rate is going to be and the cost of materials. They made their best estimate, including an inflation estimate when they came up with the budget. But we would know by probably February how this is really running. If we're going to have, if we have to eat into the contingency and by how much.
Thank you.
So, and then the third option, when I was talking about trying to, if we don't need this, leave it there. And I was thinking, well, when we come around to the 26th town meeting was when we would be able to talk about, let's close this out, take those, create a new article, and just use those funds to fund it. And there would be no tax impact in that year to do it. That
Discussion from the board?
That's not. So I feel like the most transparent approach to this project is to consider the 405,000 and the 25,000 in the reduction of the bond, and then be very vocal in supporting a capital reserve that we are going to know over the 5 years that will present 20,000 each of those 5 years with the intention of ensuring that the driveway gets done.
I think that capital reserve could be really kind of the maintaining the library.
I'm not sure.
The library and its property.
Well, the money was placed in the capital reserve for.
To get into the lot, to get into
Yes,
the
and I feel like from a transparency perspective, it's somewhat disingenuous to say, no, let's leave it there and not put it towards the building as it's being built. My hope, honestly, is that a well-managed build-out of that building will not result in the usage of the whole $200,000 in contingency, and that would be available at the end of the project to help you with the heating and the driveway. And because we don't know, again, I think from a transparency perspective, to be as transparent as possible, take the bond down to the 3.175. I have $3,101,324. We're pretty close. But
you can do the math based on the decisions.
I just feel strongly that if you in any way put forward, this is what the usage of those funds will be used for, you use them. And then we need to start over again and say, for future planning purposes, because they know those purposes exist, we need a capital reserve for maintenance of this very important building.
Okay,
That's what I said.
Rob?
Okay, that's what Dan said.
Rob, you got any comments?
I agree with Tracy about the capital reserve. I think it is clearly spelled for the building and construction design. And I think that as much as we can demonstrate paying down the bond, that long-term kind of debt, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I know I would support pushing for a capital reserve. I think capital reserves are great. And they help the town a lot. And I think it would be great for the library. And I don't think that would be hard to.
I don't think it would be hard to get support for it.
I think part of my anxiety about that 25,000, part of it would be good to have starting with the capital reserve. The other part is that the initial budget we were given for the project was something like 3.6 million. And we, at the building committee, cut that number back. Like we cut out half of the furniture, we cut out, well, we did cut the contingency. We cut out some other things. So that furniture, fixtures, and equipment section of the budget, we cut quite a bit out of that.
You pared it back.
We pared it back significantly. So
Is this the same firm since day one?
the architectural firm,
Yeah.
yes. And
Okay.
actually, we chose Bowen Construction as the construction management also about 4 or 5 years ago.
So for in my perspective, and this is from somebody experienced in fundraising, if you know you have 65,000 in pledges out there to still present to those that have committed, and you know that you've pared back your furniture, you have completely opened a door as to why ponying up those pledges becomes so very important to this. But I really feel like to have the community embrace the project in the spirit in which we all stood up and said, we must do this, I feel like it has to be utilized.
I'm in agreement as well. I think that is what a lot of people had in mind and envisioned
what they
and
expect.
what we're told and echoed. So I'm hearing from the board, maybe to use the $25,000 to buy down the bond amount for the library. Could I maybe entertain a motion?
Before we do that motion, do you want to finalize the donation and pledges thing?
Yes, as far as numbers wise, yes.
It sounded like what I was hearing for donations and pledges with some nodding around, but we'll put it to the group, is use the 405 cash on hand number.
Correct.
And anything in addition, including pledges, would be above, in addition to the project budget. So to be used for things that were taken out of the budget or furniture. And the only clarifying question
No, I'm not understanding what you're saying. The 405 would reduce the bond amount.
He's
Right.
talking about the pledges.
The 25,000 would reduce the bond amount.
Yep.
And anything going forward of the 65,000 from today forward, I don't think that needs to be.
It doesn't,
June.
that was going to be a clarification.
From today forward, that is collected, could be utilized for that furniture.
Okay. Is there agreement on that component of it? So we had talked about later in the process before, closer to June 17th, we had talked about the pledges, but we're thinking, one member's thinking, you just use that 405 number from the foundation, leave it at that, use the 25 from the capital reserve,
Approach
and
the
anything
pledgers
beyond
with the
is
need.
addition.
Yes.
Correct.
Well, I think I would disagree with that. I think the pledges were made. Presumably we'll get, not all of them, and people have died and
Yeah, I think there's
life changes.
50,000 of that 65 that is highly questionable
Okay,
because of a death.
but I think those.
Oh.
anything we
50,000 of it?
That's what she said, Select Person Capiello.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any of that money that those pledges come in and you have those available on the date, that number should come off the bond.
The problem
think we
is
only
the
have till
prep
June
paperwork
17th
has to be done how many days in
to do
advance?
that.
June 17th is the paperwork date.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
the-
I was thinking you needed 30 days, and I'm thinking, well, we're almost close to the 30 day. Okay.
It's a phone call on the 17th to say the final number is. The select board could make that final number decision on the 10th, but I think the importance of this discussion is to have some mutual understanding of what numbers are you looking for. So if you're happy, if the board collectively is happy with the 405, we don't have to take any action on the 10th. If the board collectively says, hey, as of June 10th, whatever the cash number is as of June 10th, or Danon's talking about the pledges, but I think let's iron that out now. Let's get to consensus on that.
The 405 is already above and beyond what they were
In the
even
warrant
considering.
article, right.
I mean, you guys, kudos to you guys for raising as much money as you have, above and beyond what you were telling the voters you were going to try to raise. And thank you for scaling back all that you did, going to a renovation project, which is practically half the cost of a new build, scaling back all of your designs to get it into a budget the taxpayers were going to support. And, you know, kudos to that. And so I think that this 405 is already above and beyond. The 25,000 from the capital reserve above and, you know, and intended to do this. I think that sends a really good message about what we're trying to do to save the town money. And any future, you know, ongoing fundraising and stuff like that, great that you can continue to find that and that people want to invest in their community and make the library as beautiful as they can. So.
We hear consensus at 2 of the 5. Do you have an opinion, or maybe Select Person Capiello?
So I want to make sure that I understand this. So it would be 405 plus the 25,000. And we would be using that amount as of today or as of June 17th.
410.
That the proposal is to use that number as the final number, not to get another update closer to the June 17th. I think that's what Select Person Hardikoff and Gibson were talking about.
So that puts us at
4:30 today.
3.2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thereabouts.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I can go with that.
So make a motion to accept the 405,000 in addition to the 25,000 for the library
Capital reserve balance.
capital reserve balance.
And truth be told, we'll probably have to do a separate RSA 3195B process for that amount above 327,000, just like we did for the Pond Hill Culverts grant. We can do that at June 10th. It has to be noticed in the paper. Residents already approved the acceptance of the 327,000, but anything over 10,000, we have to go through that statutory process. So I think just your acknowledgement of what process you want, what numbers you want to use is enough. You can make a motion to solidify that, but we won't be formally accepting the additional money yet.
We'll make a note of it. And appreciate you guys.
Well, let's take a motion and a vote, but just the motion is to plan to reduce the bond cost by the cash on hand in the foundation of $405,676 and use the available balance of the Library and Community Center Capital Reserve to further reduce the bond costs. All additional grants or donations afterwards would be in addition to the project budget.
Correct.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Okay. Yes.
Hardikoff, yes.
Gibson, yes.
Sakosha.
Capiello, aye.
That's
Your questions?
no, my only question of you, and by the way, that's fine. I think that's really a very reasonable solution. And the foundation submitted a $100,000 grant for solar, which hopefully we'll know about.
Fingers crossed,
Yeah,
yeah.
fingers crossed on
Let
that
the
one.
sun shine.
The mention of, do you want to have, and this is obviously not my responsibility, but as far as the bond or splitting off some portion of that as a separate loan.
It seems like there's no purpose to do that now because there's no additional money that they'd be looking to pay off sooner. So it sounds like all of the money is part of the original project budget that the select board's interested in reducing is the cash that's already on hand, that we don't have to have it all by the time we issue the bond, but just knowing that that's cash on hand and the capital reserve. I think the borrowing separately was only valuable if there was money we weren't positive we would get or hadn't gotten yet, so that when it came in, we could pay that off. We had talked early in the process, and it was actually your suggestion to take some portion of the contingency and borrow that locally in case it's not needed. It sounds like, or I'm hearing from you that it's probably less likely that is a good financial decision. The interest rate we'll get from a bank is much higher than we'll get from the bond bank. The trade-off is the bond bank is a 20-year commitment with no prepayment. There's economies of scale that we lose if we borrow from a separate entity. So any money that we would save in being able to pay that off early, that's staff time of administering a separate loan. So any less than $50,000, it might not be worth it to get a separate note.
And I, having gone through this process in the past few years for a rather large, rather expensive building, I will say to you that if your building committee is very much on top of your contractor and you can keep those contingencies not being used because of, oh, we picked the wrong flooring, now we need to start over. If you really stay on top of your meetings every week or every other week throughout the process, you know, my hope for you guys is that there is contingency to redo the parking lot as you need it and your heaters, should you want to do them all at once. That may be a cost savings for you in the long run. So
excellent.
Yeah, subs haven't been picked yet. Shop them hard.
Shop them hard. I had some good ones.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for being here.
Okay, so that's it for public hearing and invited guests. Thanks for all that participated. That brings us next up to the consent agenda. Dana did mention to me that we wanted to highlight these, both L&M. It is the Emergency Medical Service, EMS, Week Proclamation, and then also Public Works Week Proclamation as well. We thank all of those who provide the services to the town that keeps it going and our people safe.
Yes.
And our roads are clear.
And it is also National Law Enforcement Week.
Bringing it in from all over. All
yes.
right.
So for everyone doing everything for this amazing town of ours, we appreciate you.
Okay, consent agenda approval.
Motion to approve the consent agenda for May 13th of 2024.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibbs, aye.
Sakoshai.
Capiello, aye.
Okay, next on to appointments is going to be the TIP, the Town Center Tax Incremental Financing District Advisory Board. It is a board of 8. The board and I have briefly discussed 5 full-time members, including myself, Garth Swenson, and Jesse Bennett, Matt Moores, and Scott Shepard. In addition, I would have a term on the board till 2027, Garth Swenson being term till 2026, Matt Moores, 2025, Jesse Bennett, 25, Scott Shepard, 26, Jake Rogers as an alternate, 27, Frederick Tester as an alternate, 26, and Jeffrey Estes alternate at 25. Do I have a motion from the board?
Motion, sir.
Okay.
Second, and thank you to all the candidates who stepped up to serve in this really important committee.
It's super exciting that we got so many people to participate. It's
And
wonderful.
that they all have an opportunity to participate.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Well, and they all bring some good quality to the table.
Yes.
Roll call.
Sure, guy.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakoshai.
Capiello, aye.
Okay, on staff reports.
Yes, thank you. Work anniversaries. So our first and only meeting in May. So these are those employees that were hired in May, historically dating back many years, especially the first 3 here over 20 years each. Dawn Millette in the fire department for 26 years. Kim Karakis, our esteemed town clerk, is 24 years of employment in the town of Barrington this month. Wendy Rowe, our assistant library director and the children's librarian, 20 years ago this month she was hired. Charlie Kilgore and Richard Wentworth were both hired in the transfer station 6 years ago. Joe Spinning, the fire department, 6 years ago. Gary Brock and Gaden Lambert were 2 years ago in the fire department. Stephanie Mahoney 1 year ago. Aaron Ciotti and Josh Durham were both this time last year, fire EMS. Thank you, those employees. Strategic planning, progress, and future action steps. So these are goal sets, 1, 3, and 5 year goals that we set at our strategic planning session. And we talked about doing regular check-ins on this, and we talked about kind of the fit and finish for doing so. I think maybe it will make sense for the 3 or 5 year goals as we evolve to use more of a Gantt chart style to track those kind of multi-layered as we make some progress on those. The 1 year goals, by the end of this meeting, hopefully there will be 3 or 4 of them which will be accomplished, which is terrific just a couple of months after we set them. But how I structured it for the moment, and I welcome feedback for how we do this moving forward, and I'll plan to do it at all of our monthly meetings over the summer, is I listed the goal, I gave a title, and then the goal that we set, and then just 2 bullet points to keep it simple. The most recent progress and the most upcoming or most immediately necessary future action steps. And so I think this might be a good way to keep it simple, come back to each town administrator report, go to a goal. Hey, where are we with the library MOU? Oh yeah, we secured the existing agreement and looked for other agreements from communities, and we need to set up a schedule and process to review and update the MOU with the library trustees to complete it prior to 2025 budget development. And so each month, each meeting, there will be progress. And so sometimes action steps will move to progress and new action steps will come in, and we'll kind of build on it from there. Does that work? Kind of fit and finish wise, and then we can talk about the details if there are any questions.
I think it's an excellent live working document for us to be paying attention to each time we're meeting.
Keeping it relative.
Yeah.
Do you want all of the history in every select board meeting, or just the most recent progress and the most immediate future action step?
I would say most.
Just those 2 bullet points. We'll keep a history of all of them in the background, but okay. Questions or comments about any of the goal areas, things that we've done or things that we need to do? Obviously, it's incumbent upon me to bring forward those action steps to you, so we're doing a lot of them as we go, but this will allow you to help track, and the public.
I would just say to you, like, for instance, if there's something in the 3-year goal and we happen to organically have touched upon that we highlight that.
Excellent point.
Okay.
So I was wondering about coming up with the reason I developed the titles is because looking for a way that we could refer back to them simply. I thought about numbering them in some convention so that we could come back, but maybe a note in agenda items that refer back to a goal that this addresses an action step of the MAP 263 lots 13.1 and 19 development plan, which is a 3-year goal. Excellent, excellent point. Yep, we can do that.
I think that just capturing that's going to be important, not necessarily for the board, but for your future seated boards and for the public to be able to transparently digest the steps that are happening.
Excellent. Other questions, comments, feedback? Okay, awesome. Moving on. So now we're on page 9 of 18. So hazardous industries regulation update from Stratford Regional Planning Commission. So you remember a few meetings ago, we talked about, it was actually a session that Select Person Hardikoff attended at the annual New Hampshire Municipal Association conference about regulating hazardous industries, air quality, and some of the other concerns. And so I reached out to a few partners, including Stratford Regional Planning Commission. And the question that I posed to Stratford Regional Planning was really twofold. One, are you aware of other communities that are doing this well in our region? And then the second point, which is more topical to the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, which is, what role does a regional association like Stratford Regional Planning Commission play in helping to mitigate the risks from one community to another? So especially when it relates to something like air quality, anybody that lives in the north half of Barrington knows that on muggy days, that some of that gas is trapped from turnkey. You can smell it. You wonder, does it, how impactful is that? So I knew that there was a designation for a project of regional impact. What I didn't know is if it had really any teeth or mechanism to effectuate change in this area of kind of multi-state regulation. So to the first point about other communities that are doing this, there wasn't really much feedback. There wasn't much direction. So we'll go to the state and get and those consultants to get some direction. To the point about regional impact, there are no teeth, and that's a construct of our state law. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a consequence of how we're organized. So there are not any teeth to a regional project of regional impact designation. It does give the Stratford Regional Planning Commission kind of like a butter status at those hearings, which is an important part of the process, but not a controlling part of the process. And she also mentioned that the Regional Planning Commission had recently met with DES and the folks from Waste Management to talk about demand and capacity of landfill, which is kind of topical to the topic. Not exactly what we were talking about, but topical. So that's the update. And I guess the feedback I'm looking for from the board, lacking any good progress in that area, like locally, either other town partners or the Regional Planning Commission, do we want to take the step to try to engage one of those consultants that works in this area of regulation to figure out if we should do some testing and develop regulation on that? I think that would be the most likely next step if we were looking to progress the topic.
I personally would like to see us take that step.
Yep. Others?
I think that's
Well, there's nothing that they can do about it regionally, right? I mean,
No.
are we going to get to a spot where it's just, oh yeah, great, everybody else got here, but you know, nothing's going to come from it?
Well, so as we develop our own zoning ordinances, we could say the air quality in Barrington on, June 1st of 2024 read this. We will not adopt industries that allows a variation from the following areas of more than X, Y, and Z. Without that, you pretty much have invited every type of industry to town.
Well, they can also go to Rochester or Dover too, because
understood.
And it can blow over here, and even when they're testing it, just because the wind's blowing this way on a certain day, now that knocks it down and/or makes somebody's numbers higher. It's just going to be a revolving door of money and testing, and to say, hey, the wind's blowing this way today. That's just
so without the zoning ordinance, you have nothing to stand on as far as limiting any type of industry based on air quality.
Well, we can do it for our town, but it's not going to help the big issue, which is at turnkey right now, is what everybody's saying. So, but I don't want to just do something just to do it, to have nothing behind it, because then we're wasting time.
The course was very focused on the health and well-being of our school-age children and very specific industries that are so needed that, and for instance, taking single-use plastic and then recycling it. Well, it sounds like a really wise idea for the oceans. It's actually really detrimental to the well-being of our children. And so placing a facility like that in the town of Barrington, it's quite possible because we have lots of open land space. If we don't have those planning board reviews and do zoning regulations to protect our air quality, you have no right to deny an application from an industry here in Barrington. And that was the entire purpose of the training session.
As an alternative, I could arrange to have a consultant come make a brief presentation to the select board with a proposal. So something where we're not making a commitment to spend money.
I'd like to see that, and maybe get a little bit more structure behind what Tracy's saying, because I obviously I have more questions.
And we are signing up for new classes for this year through New Hampshire Municipal Association. And I would just encourage anyone on the board who's interested in the topic to take that class if it's offered, because it was pretty eye-opening for me.
I think more information would be helpful, but I think that if it's being done at a county level, Barrington having a voice at the table.
Like Charles.
But if discussions are happening at a county level, and Barrington's talking about zoning, and Dover and Rochester are all talking about zoning, what everyone's talking about. And you can try to be on the same page so that your neighbor's not polluting your town too, so.
Right. Because I also heard that, they're supposed, facilities like those, like minded business, I guess, are supposed to provide those as well. So, I mean, it might not be something to where we have to go and have a separate entity come out and do their own individual test, when yet they could be provided from, the person that could be changed there.
Select Person Capiello, any thoughts?
It feels like we need a study commission on this. I don't have enough background to know where to go with this, but I would like to further the conversation.
So yeah, I'll ask a consultant for a proposal and to make a presentation to the select board, kind of question and answer, give us an idea of what the next steps are and what it would take to accomplish those steps. Is there support for that?
There is. Scotia.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what we'll do for the next step. I'm not positive I can schedule it for June, but we'll get it in an upcoming meeting.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Connor. MOA, Cottle, doesn't seem like you have much for us today.
That one's dead. I have a few things for signature. Actually, there are 5 different documents for wet signature today. 2 proclamations, the Pond Hill Culvert Grant Agreement, the application for an application for voluntary change of address for one property, and the tax warrant.
First time tax bill.
Yep.
All right.
And then we have a couple things on DocuSign on Thursday. That'll be an oath of office just approved and a raffle permit. So.
Excellent. Thank you. That takes us next to old business, and I'm sure what everybody in the crowd's been waiting for. Next up is Ayers Lake Boat Launch. Board discussion.
Do you want to give an update from the answers from last week's meeting? I mean, obviously they're in the materials. I don't have to, but would you like them?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So what I've done is I've kept all of the original background information. So if you're following along in the town administrator report, I will fast forward to page 12. So we are at, what's that, 15 XV. So at the last select board meeting, there were 3 members, and the members felt, hey, it's a good idea. Let's wait until we have a full board to make a decision. But there were also a lot of questions generated. And so I will go through some of those topics that came up, questions, and the answers that I was able to either get or research from that time to now. So first topic was the invasive species mitigation recommendations. So as we heard at public comment, Amy Smagula is kind of the point of contact at DES for invasive species in New Hampshire. And fortunately, I was able to connect with her on a rainy day because this time of year she's out doing the exact kind of field work like at Swains Lake, evaluating the progress of the treatment facilities. So she confirmed that, not unsurprisingly, invasive species generally start at access points. And so we had heard that, and that was, she confirmed that that is where invasive species generally propagate from. The DES, in focusing on education and mitigation, kind of their 2 main taglines are clean, drain, dry. So that relates to the boats that you use in lakes. They want you to clean them, drain them, dry them before you go from water body to water body. And then for, kind of like lake associations or municipalities, it's education, early detection, rapid response. And so the state generally encourages public access, and this is evidenced through DES's authority. They can quarantine areas for invasive or toxics that are present, but they don't have any authority to restrict public access. And she mentioned that public access, a lack of public access may reduce a water body's ability to receive funding for lake management projects. So I asked about how they're spread. I know Select Person Hardikoff did some research, and you can speak to that about invasives and water bodies that don't allow boating. And she said another common source of invasives, especially milfoil, is on tackle from fishing. So you get lures stuck in weeds, and then you bring those weeds to other places, but also other boats. And we know this has been talked about. It's not just motorboats and trailers. Other boats bring it also. And so the early detection, education, early detection, rapid response is still the focus. I asked about what tools we could use on the education side. One thing that she didn't see on the plan that she recommended is an informational kiosk at the launch as a kind of posting board to put the information, which was a great suggestion. The engineers are adding that to the plan. The Lake Host program. So she had an interesting suggestion on when I brought up the fact that, you know, the grant kind of only goes to the most popular launches. She said that because there's a program for Swains Lake, it's possible that we could reach out to Lake Host program and say, hey, what if it was just a program for Barrington? And that funding could support the Swains Lake boat launch and the Ayers Lake boat launch, and, you know, kind of just be a dual purpose, like boating, safe lakes in Barrington. And so that would be something we would have to ask the New Hampshire Lakes organization. And as we know, their application deadline is done for this year, but we could consider pursuing that for next year. Something else that might help us is with that pursuit is some seed funding. So maybe the select board wants to consider a capital reserve as a funding source to help support, you know, augment that program or other efforts on the topic. So that might help with prioritization of funding for that. Okay, clean, drain, dry. So I asked the question, which was brought up before the select board, like, hey, there's no great way to clean a boat on Daniel Cater Road for this boat access point. And she explained that the expectation with clean, drain, dry isn't that it happens at the launch. It's that it happens at home. And that's what they're focusing their education on, that your boat should be clean, drained, and dry before you go to a water body and then when you get home. And that they're not looking to get washing facilities at every boat launch in the state. One, it's not practical, but that's not the expectation. And so I asked if there was any, like Barrington has a lot of lakes. We're not the only community that has a lot of lakes. I asked if there was any example of like a communal clean, drain, dry station where seasonally people could bring their boats, clean, drain, dry, and then move on someplace away from bodies of water. But you know, we could have signs posted up at all the access points in Barrington that says, hey, drive up to the Ramsdale Lane lot and clean, drain, dry your boat there before you go to, you know, whatever places. So she wasn't familiar with any community that does that, but that could be something that we want to consider if the infrastructure would support it. She expressed concern with liability, mostly because to do clean, drain, dry properly, she said the water needs to be really hot and high pressure. And I was kind of thinking that, you know, maybe a garden hose is better than nothing. Maybe it doesn't have to be a pressure washer and 140 degrees, but we could evaluate that regardless if the select board is interested. Ayers Lake Association questions. So those were asked and answered by the association, so we can move on from that. Parking on Daniel Cater Road. So I'm on page 14 now. So there was question about exactly what the parking expectations would be. So I met with the police chief and road agent out on site, and we consulted the fire chief as well. And in those conversations, it gave the town an opportunity to review even just the existing concerns, right? Campers walking down from Camp Fireside down Pond Hill Road and Daniel Cater Road, the existing access site, but also the parking, which is within the town's road right away at the Camp Fireside Beach. And so kind of regardless of the boat ramp improvement project, the recommendation, the unanimous recommendation from the police chief, fire chief, and road agent is to have the select board consider doing Daniel Cater Road as seasonally one way. So one way from Pond Hill Road to 202, from like Memorial Day to Labor Day, covering the camping season, but also addressing the areas of that road that are one way, and the camp traffic, the beach parking area, and whatever level of a launch is on Daniel Cater Road in that area. So something to consider to support the big picture idea of safety on Daniel Cater Road, parking, and other concerns. Specific to the parking associated with the proposed improvement. So, and I have the engineers working on an updated plan. I don't have it available for tonight, but there's about 150 feet from the boat launch north, which if you're looking at the boat launch, that would be to the right. And that 150 feet would accommodate about 3 vehicles with trailers. And this is the section of the road where there's vegetation growing both towards the road and towards the lake on the slope down from the road. The problem with the vegetation that's growing towards the road is, especially when it foliates, it encumbers the road surface, the width of the road quite a bit. And so the original plan called for removing all the vegetation, either loaming and seeding or using like riprap stone along the bank. In talking with DES, they don't permit this, which this is something that came up from a public comment. There's no permitting required for road maintenance. So any roadside clearing or road widening wouldn't require any permitting. That's exempt from permitting. But we asked our partners at DES what would be a way that we could both protect the shoreland there, some sort of vegetative buffer, but also maintain the width of the road for travel, and in this case, and also for parking. And a pretty simple recommendation: take and clear that vegetation that grows towards the road and leave the vegetation that grows towards the lake. So that vegetation still maintains the root structure that stabilizes the bank. There's that vegetative buffer, and then included in that vegetation management would be like topping those plants so they're not obstructing the view around the turn, which actually, if you drive down Daniel Cater Road in that section, I think it's probably the resident that has the camp there. They already do that probably so they can maintain a view of the lake from the windows in their house. But the idea would be to kind of extend that the whole stretch and clear the vegetation that grows towards the road. So doing that would allow about 150 feet of trailered parking to the north side of the launch. And then from the launch to the south, which is now to the left, there's an area of about 150 feet before a big tree. And the idea is that would be signed as a loading zone. One of the concerns that was brought up is there's no good place for people to clean, drain, dry, or inspect, or prep their boat, and they end up in the road. And so the idea of this section is it would be a designated loading zone for trailered boats launching. So it would be no parking, kind of loading zone only. And that's 50 feet, accommodate a vehicle with a trailer along the side of Daniel Cater Road. And then there's about 50 feet from that first tree to the section of the Camp Fireside fence, which is before the gate. And that section, we were originally thinking could accommodate an additional vehicle with trailer, but there was a lot of talk about how likely this ramp is to be utilized and continue to be utilized by car top boats. And it would probably be better or more effective, given the geometry of the road, to have this designated as like car top boat only parking. So like you can't park there if you're going to the beach, but if you have a kayak, canoe, paddleboard, you can park here and then use the launch closest to the launch. Then there's about 25 feet where Camp Fireside, in my meeting with the executive director, they'd like to keep parking free, so no parking for foot access into the gate for the Camp Fireside beach. And then that leaves about 100 feet of the existing where folks park now to access the beach. Which one note on that, so when we were out there doing the site, the police chief, the road agent, and I, the signs, I'd seen the signs that said no trailered parking, and reading some of the other signs, some of the signs say permit parking only, all others will be towed at owner's expense. So the reason that's problematic is because that parking is the town's road. So that's a public area, anybody can park there. And so this is probably in that category of, regardless of what happens with the ramp, with support from the select board, we'll work with Camp Fireside to get those signs taken down.
And get updated signs for them so the kids are safe.
Exactly.
Yes? Okay.
Something that we can enforce. So yeah, that leaves about 100 feet, and the executive director at Camp Fireside wants to make sure that they have a gate where they launch their boats, and that's at the end of that 100 feet. So like the no parking would start kind of at that, or the parking limits would stop before that gate. Okay, so that's the parking. Questions so far? Okay. USDA, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So I forget if this has come up in conversation before, but the Camp Fireside a number of years ago sold a conservation easement to USDA through their Natural Resources Conservation Service. And this conservation easement is interesting because it draws boundaries across Ayers Lake. And the reason that's curious is because as a public body, the state in public trust owns to the high water mark both the land or the land underneath and the water above. So this is an undetermined, we don't yet have an answer here. And I don't think it needs to impact the select board's decision. If we move forward or if we don't, we will work either way to kind of resolve this question that exists between jurisdiction, ownership by Camp Fireside, easement interest by USDA or NRCS, and the state's ownership interest. One of the reasons that this answer is difficult to attain is because some of the details are probably not financially practical to arrive at. One of the examples is the high water mark. So if you look at the list of public waters in New Hampshire, there are only a handful that have an official elevation of the high water mark. And most of those were arrived at through litigation. Lake Winnipesaukee, for example. There was some fight between where the high water mark was and who owned what. They litigated it, and now we know the official high water mark on Lake Winnipesaukee is X. That doesn't exist for Ayers Lake, and I don't think anybody's motivated to invest the time or money to perfectly identify. What I explained to the representative from NRCS was that both the easement plan and the town's surveyed plan show the water level at the same spot. And so, you know, hopefully we can arrive at some mutual agreement of the water level. The other reason that it'll be difficult to perfectly identify the lines is because the road layout, Daniel Cater Road, which was Dover Road and then Old Dover Road before it was Daniel Cater Road, was laid out in the 1850s. And it was laid out at 3 rods wide, which is about 50 feet. And that layout isn't perfectly apparent in this section of Daniel Cater Road. So that 50 feet could start at the easterly edge of the maintained road, or that 50 feet could be, the road could be perfectly centered in that 50 feet. And so some of these answers that will be necessary to have to kind of find the official answer to this question might not be practical or financially practical to achieve. So what I asked the representative from USDA is I said, look, this ramp area, and this is a topic that came up in public comment, this ramp area is being used right now. It's being used to launch boats. It's being used as access to the lake. The problem with the fact that it's being used right now is it's really bad for the environment to have boats and trailers backing onto the lake bed, causing the turbidity of the shore of the lake, the erosion of the shore of the lake into the lake. And the town's proposal is simply to take the same size of the ramp, it's 12 feet wide now, use concrete planks to eliminate the erosion and allow the boats and trailers to back down onto concrete that doesn't wash away when you drive back and forth on it. So what I asked the representative from USDA, which she hasn't been able to give a determination about yet, is if the concern is protecting the easement area and people are already driving on it kind of in an adverse way to the easement area. Again, we're talking about a potential section that's like under 2 feet of water offshore from the road. Then would an improved area be better than an unimproved area if people are going to access it anyways? And obviously the natural extension of that question is if the town does nothing, if or what would USDA do to prevent people from that kind of in that 2 foot depth of water from driving their boats and trailers on the shore of the lake? So I'm hopeful that we can arrive at a resolution to the concerns. Most recently, there was a request to the state for a copy of the water rights that are associated with the dam, which might help define the ownership interests in the area. anyways, all that to say, this is something that exists as an unknown, and it's something that will have to be resolved at some point before the project moves forward 100%. But I don't think it has to, I don't think we have to wait for that determination before a decision is made. If we're able to reconcile those issues and concerns, then we'll move forward, and if we aren't, then we won't. Number 5, pictures of a 3-foot depth of a boat ramp. So very fortunately, we had some nice days last week, and our representatives from the fire department took out the boat. Now you'll see that the smaller boat is still ratchet strapped to the top. So they didn't go take a joyride as much as I was hoping that they would. But they backed the boat into 3 feet of water and took some pictures, so you can see this is the maximum depth of that ramp. So this is what we've talked about as the biggest limitations of the ramp in that area is the depth of water. And that's obviously the depth kind of at the average level of the lake. Of course, it's managed by a dam, so it doesn't, they draw that down in the off season, just like we do with Swains Lake Dam. So that's kind of the visual representation of, how much water is there. Okay, Ayers Lake and Barrington boat registration data. So now you'll remember at the last select board meeting, I told you there's no way they'll give us that data. I'll ask, but there's no way. Wouldn't you know, we have cooperative state partners that were very glad to do the research. So I gave them a list of roads around the lake. Oh wait, I skipped it. And they shared with me that there are 113 boats registered to addresses along Ayers Lake. And then in Barrington, population of 9,500, for every 3 people, we have 1 registered boat. There's 3,055 registered boats in Barrington.
Wow.
All the more reason to consider maybe that communal clean drain dry station. Okay. Also, I asked the management of Ayers Lake Campground the questions that were asked about campers and boats. And what they shared with me is that only their seasonal campers have boats on Ayers Lake, and there are fewer than 10 per year. They shared that they discourage customers from bringing boats which aren't suitable for the lake, and I was told that transient campers do not bring boats. Okay, moving on. Boat license reciprocity. So there was a question about if somebody has a boating license in another state, can they boat in New Hampshire? Chief Joy connected with Marine Patrol and confirmed that New Hampshire is fully reciprocal with approximately 45 other states, including Maine and Vermont, under the conditions that the license is issued by the state agency and the license is endorsed by NASBLA, which is the Boat Operations Training National Association of State Boating licenses, agencies, things. Okay, so those were the questions that I was tasked with answering. Those are the answers I was able to arrive at, and I'm happy to answer additional questions.
I just wanted to share further information that I had found that I was very concerned at the prospect of lakefront property in lakes that have invasive species of plants losing 20% of their value. I did look up that study. It's actually published. I think it's Moulton Borough. Could be Wolfboro, but I think it's Moulton Borough. They used that study in one of their discussion points, which when you Google it, brings it up. It was a non-published study between 1990 and 1995, when, as most of us know, the real estate market had pretty much crashed. It was the first time that I bought a home and was very lucky to have done so at that time. But there is absolutely no other data that backed up that point, because it certainly was a concern. 50% of the 98 bodies of water that are experiencing milfoil first had that occur between 2000 and 2010 in the state of New Hampshire. So almost 50% of them. And that was before, I don't remember the terminology, but before the state in 2002 began the initiative to educate boaters to clean their darn boats before they put them in the next body of water. So it made sense to me based upon the fact that there was no state program during the time that we were seeing such an infestation of milfoil that, of course, there was a ridiculous amount of growth. I grew up, I told you I wasn't a boater. Well, I was till I was 7 years old. I grew up on Canopy Lake, directly on North Policy Street, across from the lake. It's a body of water that actually provides the town with its water source, and so no motorized boats have ever been allowed on that lake and still are not. And they have milfoil now in Canopy Lake. It occurred, I think, 3 years ago. Willand Pond over in Somersworth does not allow motorboats, and they are experiencing invasive species of milfoil. So I needed to understand, was this concern so heightened, and was the data backing up that heightened concern? And those are the results of what I researched. While sitting here, I also, just so you know, researched the cost of this, and it is $1 million in 2021. I'm sure it's more than that now. But well, I'm just telling you what I found when I researched it at another state. They paid $1 million to have it installed, which is 10 times the cost of the boat ramp project. So I don't know that we would ever be able to fund something like that.
About 3.5 libraries.
Well, hang on. One thing I do want to say going into this before we take a vote is that I am in agreement that one of the most amazing things about Barrington is our natural resources. And so potentially creating some type of capital reserve that focuses on our water quality in this town is not a terrible idea. I think if I'm talking about air quality, we should also be somewhat, focused on these natural resources. We need, you need food, clothing, air and water to live. So I think it's important that we do consider a capital reserve. That's it. That's all I got.
I would just add, I think that the select board should sponsor, my opinion, a warrant for this that would create a capital reserve both for mitigating invasive species and for educating the public.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Dana.
Yeah. I think the idea of shrinking the ramp is a real waste. Because if people are going to move their vehicles down there, that just means we're going to have vehicles stuck, and that'll further add to the turbidity and the movement and the erosion of the banks. I noticed motorboats on that lake. I don't know if they're all from outside of the community. If the community has nothing but canoes and kayaks, but I think everyone has motorboats on that lake, is my interpretation of that. So I think to make this put a 4 or 6 foot concrete ramp there is really a waste. I don't think it contributes anything to any of the things that we want to protect the lake from.
I would concur with that, because unless you spend a lot of time behind a trailer, and if you're trying to back down 4 or 6 foot, you're going to be right on the money, pretty close. So I definitely agree with that. Joyce, do you have any?
So here are my thoughts. I was really hoping that the Ayers Lake Association would take over the building of the kayak ramp. And since that is not something that they are prepared to do, and if we don't go ahead with this, we're back to square one, and we probably have no likelihood of getting a grant again in the future. So I'm feeling like I want to move ahead with the current plan because I think it will be an improvement to what we have now. And we have been asked by residents to do something to that current situation. But I would like to have the proposal and then talk about some of the other issues separately and discuss those. So the warrant article, the parking plan, I would like to direct Connor to look at whether we could do some kind of central clean, drain, and dry situation for Barrington and just see what those options are. And to also direct Connor to look at whether we could get a lay host program for all lakes in Barrington.
I agree as well.
At the last select board meeting, I shared a lot of my thoughts about the proposal as well. And I've spoken with many of you. I'm neighbors with many of you. I spent a lot of money last year personally on our own property, having a specialist come in to remove invasive plants. So I'm very conscious about those things. But looking at all of the benefits, looking at any of the risks, again, I shared all my points at the last meeting. I think that the town has done a lot to address concerns that were expressed by the Conservation Commission, things to do with erosion. You know, they've gone away from the proposed idea of loam and seed, keeping vegetative buffers and all the things to protect the erosion. So I think a lot of the questions and concerns that had been brought up have also been addressed.
Yeah, and I feel like too, you know, this isn't a new entrance or by means, you know, the ultimate trout fishing pond. You know, and I think it's going to remain, you know, business as usual for traffic. You know, I don't imagine there's going to be a 75-foot Donzi on there. You know, necessarily doing lake runs. You know, because it's not a testing lake. There's specific lakes for that, for those enthusiasts. I think, you know, whether it's a fishing lure, a dirty boat, a dirty tire, you know, there's problems everywhere. I, you know, agree with Joyce. Maybe getting more of our lakes and ponds on a lake host, that would be really cool. And to pursue it more at a state level, to where, you know, we have Lakes Region in New Hampshire. And I think we should push that as well, maybe getting some of the people that represent us at that level to push for more water protection acts and grants and availability. Tonight, these people and the residents of Barrington are looking to see if we are in favor of proceeding with the Ayers Lake Boat Launch project as proposed or not. So is anybody on the board ready to proceed with a motion?
Sure. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Dan. Okay. So make a motion to approve the engineering proposal as presented for map 263. Am I reading the wrong thing?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm reading the correct. Sorry. Make a motion to proceed with the Ayers Lake Boat Launch Improvement Project as proposed and continue to work with stakeholders to address outstanding concerns, and that the select board propose a capital reserve fund for mitigation and education purposes regarding our bodies of water.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call.
Nanchuk, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Koshak.
Capiello, aye.
I'll keep you posted.
Excellent.
And so are we in agreement then that we will direct Connor to look at, what did I say, the lay host monitoring program, we did the Warren article, the regional clean drain. Yeah, okay, we're all in agreement on that. And
yeah,
I'll bring back information and we can.
Because I have a clever idea for that as well.
Okay, awesome.
Excellent.
And the one-way Daniel Cato Road for the summer and the parking plan, all that's included in the motion.
I didn't get the sense that the one-way was. I mean, I think the project will take some time. I think probably we can revisit that and kind of as a separate topic, give opportunity for public input on that. I think it's a creative solution to the concerns that were raised, but I think we should probably take that on as a separate topic. Yeah, you know, maybe at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good to me. Joyce, any more comments? Questions?
No, yeah, just as long as we keep addressing these issues, I'm happy with that.
Okay, excellent. That's going to move us on to map 263 lots 13.1 and 19 engineering.
Is this our, this is our.
Behind Allegiance
125
Trucks.
Yeah, 125 acres and 8 acres.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so this is, oh, yeah, go ahead, Jim, please.
Yeah, so this is just to continue with trying to propose that lot more desirable, just to go through, brush up, bring it up to current date, address any issues, and
The
any
cost?
or updates.
10,900.
Oh. Sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
Any discussion from the board?
No, that's a lot less money than I thought it was going to be.
Well, we're using the same firm that did it originally, so
Okay.
they already have some of that, so that's already in there, so we don't have to waste time and money to get somebody new to go back through.
Good.
This is building on top without excavating.
Yes, yep, so they're gonna evaluate what options there are to build on top and give a couple of different options. The ideal would be a big user, which if anybody in the community knows a big user, you know, multiple tens of thousands of square feet, hundreds of thousands of square feet facility, that'd be a great site for it, but evaluate the opportunity for that and then the opportunity for smaller facilities.
Great. Okay, looking for a motion to make a motion to approve the engineering proposal as presented for map 263 lots 13.1 and 19 to be funded out of the 2024 incident fund.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Sakosha.
Yeah, aye.
Capiello, aye.
Remember we added to old business?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Okay, old business. First up is the, young business.
No, old business, we added to old business, the renovation project at rec.
Yes. Okay, so remember.
I was out of the room. What did we add?
So old business, it is the recreation. I don't know if you remember about a year and a half ago or back in 21, they proposed a project in the front to expand offices. We know great COVID hit, things got suspended. And what the rec is looking to do is to pick up and run with it because we received the bond.
The $1 million grant.
$1 million grant. $1 million grant.
Understood.
So now.
And the RFP that was in place and the information that we gathered at that time, the board made a decision on the contractor, and your goal in adding this is to choose that contractor again.
Yep, it was a request for qualifications process, which importantly, different than a proposal process, evaluates the capability of a firm to do a scope, not the ability to do a specific project. So yeah, we'd like to take that process, renew it for the renovation project at the recreation facility, and proceed. So the $1 million grant, there's still a couple of procedural steps, but the governor made a press release. The granting agency kind of said green light. They don't expect concerns during the procedural steps, but we want to get moving, given the time constraints.
So that's
finally came through.
Yes, it did. Any discussion from the board?
I absolutely agree with that process.
Okay.
So if we get a motion, yeah, you want me to? Okay, so it would be a motion. It would be a motion to continue the RFQ process performed by Recreation in selecting a design build contractor for a renovation of 105 Ramsdale Lane for the expanded scope of a renovation of the entire building for about a $1.5 million budget.
And the voters approved that.
The voters approved the project at town meeting in 2024.
To accept the grant, which is
to accept the grant and the 150,000 matching funds from the rec revolving fund.
Right.
Yep. So that would be a so moved from somebody.
So moved.
And I second it.
Roll call.
Aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakosha.
Capiello, aye.
Great. New business.
Turn those
Excellent.
umbrellas upside down. Woohoo! Hats off to you, Jesse. Hats off to you.
A lot of big things happening. New business, Young Road, septic line install. Basically, we got some tight clearances on one side of the road, and we own on the other side of the road, and that is where they want to put their septic system. In needing to do so, they would like to cut the pavement of Young Road to bury their conduits, and then repave. And then after 2 years of it curing, they will come in with a special tar melting machine that will blend the seam that is made. So that way it won't impact and we won't have one of those humps in the road as we go down. I don't think I'm missing anything on that.
Reviewed by staff, engineer, and attorney. There were some recommendations and some conditions listed on page 17 that the applicant and their engineer is comfortable with. It would be incumbent on staff to get those details and agreements in place. But the authorization for the select board is to say, yes, under these conditions, that's okay.
Do we have any, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. So do we have any other properties? I know there's one on Small Road, but are there any other properties where people are utilizing a public roadway to run their septic line over to the actual field?
No.
Okay, so we have one on Small Road that I'm aware of. This would be the second one in the town?
Small Road's private road.
Yeah, I know.
So different for that reason.
Very different.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
We are not aware of any others. Probably the closest example is the water district and their water infrastructure, which is under the road. The probably next best example is a lot of our newer subdivisions have underground utilities. And so those are going under the roads, a lot of times along, but sometimes across. Mm-hmm. And so those are probably the most specific examples. Different than like the water district. What this proposal says is that if there is any damage caused, the property owners will pay the town to fix it, period. Additionally, if the town damages the sewer line in any way, the town is not held liable. The property owner is responsible for fixing it. And so, I mean, that's in recognition of the town allowing that crossing without, our utilities. We charge utilities property taxes for use of the right-of-way. I don't think that's probably the appropriate approach here, but adequate agreements in place. And the town attorney is familiar with examples of this in other communities. It's not generally super common, but given the constraints of the site,
Sites.
the sites.
Yeah,
So
no
yeah.
town sewer, because this is common.
Yeah, well, this was going to bring me to the other question, because this project came before the zoning board, and not only are they building the home, but they are building the garage. And is there a reason that in lieu of the garage that it could not be placed where the garage is?
So that's a good question,
So in
Go
my mind, well, I believe in land use and that owners have access to utilize their property. It's one thing to build a house. It's another thing to have the adjacent lot to that and then build a garage in lieu of your septic system. So is there a reason that it could not go there?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But if it's important to the select board to know that answer before proceeding, I can ask.
It's important to me. I don't know if it's important to the rest of the board.
I don't think it's important.
I would like to know the impact on traffic, because this will probably be done during the summertime when there's a lot of traffic on Young Road. So do we know how long it will take?
Yeah, a process like this, I mean, it's not going to be a massive shutdown. They got to saw cut both sides of the pavement, pull the trench up, dig the trench, get the conduit in place, rebury it, and then they'll probably either pave it the same day or the next day.
Mark's online if you want input from him on the traffic. That was one concern that came up, and what I included in the restrictions based on feedback from conversations with staff, the engineer, and the attorney is that subject to additional requirements such as traffic control and timing for that specific reason. So putting the town in the driver's seat. Mark, if you're available to unmute, do you want to offer an opinion on the length of construction and impacts to traffic and what we can do to mitigate that?
Well, really, this is no different than if we were doing a culvert install. I mean, the time to do this would be, you could do this thing in a day. It's basically just putting the conduit under the road. You don't have to, slide their pressure line through the conduit in the same day. This is just basically just the pipe that everything's going to go through. We put culverts in a day all the time. I mean, we did one today on Hall Road, and we were done by 1 o'clock, 1:30. So there's really not a whole lot of difference.
All right, thank you.
Probably faster.
What size is the lot across the street where the pipe is going to?
Yep, excellent question.
It's owned by the same person.
Owned by the same
There'd be
person.
some sort of easement that then allows that use going forward.
Right, and you wouldn't build on top of it.
Yes. Is it a taxable lot? Is it? I mean,
There's buildings on it.
There's buildings on it.
Yeah, I mean, it is taxed. I will share my screen so we can all see what I see. So as that comes up, you'll see a highlighted lot. This is the lot that's proposed to have the septic system. And then this lot is the lot that would be benefited from that septic system.
So it would be actually pushing the septic away from the lake.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the lake's kind of over there too. So yeah, because it doesn't show that.
Garage they're building.
Yeah, so-
Across the street of Big Rock Lane, correct?
Okay, existing shed. So the garage,
It was my
proposed house
yeah.
with overhanging deck. No, there's an existing, if you go to sheet 3 of 5, it shows the existing garage across the street.
Okay, so that is where they're running. Okay, they're understood now.
Which
Thank you.
garage were you talking about? The one across the street or the one on Big Rock Lane?
So it's my understanding that they're taking down, and I thought that it was across the street on Big Rock. I wish the engineer was here. It was my understanding. So they're removing a dilapidated, I don't know if it's a mobile home or a camper. It looks like a camper, but maybe it's a mobile home. They're removing another shed or two on the property. So we'll clean up the whole property where the home is going. But there was also a garage going in, and for some reason I thought it was directly across the street on Big Rock Lane, not across.
Well, that's showing an existing garage. It looks like in the plan there's an existing shed. If you look on the first page, that shows the existing conditions. And you can see the existing shed and deck with a ramp, 298 square feet. And then it shows the existing mobile home all the way to the right. Are you looking at the first
Yeah,
page?
you're not seeing the second project that they brought forward, and that's the project that I'm speaking of.
And then existing bathhouse.
Yeah.
So they're replacing the mobile home with a proposed house with 1 foot overhangs, step and a bulkhead, 858 square feet. And then it looks like the existing shed, they're looking to have a pervious paver patio, accessory structure, not attached deck of 200 square feet, kind of attached to that existing shed. Do you want me to pull those plans up on the screen?
I almost want to go
That's on
back
this
to
part
my
of the lot.
zoning board meeting and just double check that.
I can pull up the, if it matters to the rest of the board, I can pull up.
No, I actually, so I think that I had a more honed in, and I thought that this was across the street on Big Rock, and it's not, it's to the other side, so.
Well,
no.
the septic system is on the other side.
Oh, I see it.
And then it's coming over the waste, the septic waste is coming from the
Understood.
lot on Big Rock.
Yeah,
Big
and I
Rock.
can, yeah.
So I'll pull up the zoning board files,
I'm gonna look at that really quick.
116.6. So it looks like it came in 2024, and I'll look at the plan that they presented.
So it was 2 weeks ago, and.
So this is the plan they presented, which it looks similar. So
Okay,
this is
not-
existing
there's
conditions.
There were 2 cases. It was not about the house. This was about the garage.
Okay, the garage was on the other lot. Is that what you're saying? Okay, 116.22. For anybody following along at home, all of the application materials for any planning board or zoning board case in the last 8 or 10 years is available online, organized by map and lot. So if you look up the map and lot, you can go to the planning land use website and find all the application materials. Okay, so this is the application for across the street. It shows an existing garage. It shows the setback line. and it shows an additional proposed garage, and then it says garage building to be converted into a house. So they want to convert the existing garage into a house and build an additional garage.
It's across Young Road, it's not across Big Rock. Okay.
Okay.
So that answers your question that
Does.
they're not building a garage in lieu of a septic system.
No, my concern was that they owned the property on the other side of Big Rock. Why weren't they using it? And they don't, so.
They own a lot on Big Rock and across the street on Young Road.
Sleep and live these
Do I have
plans, I'm just telling you.
motion
I
to
move.
grant permission for work within the Young Road right-of-way as presented under the conditions and as recommended by the road agent, town attorney pursuant to RSA 36?
So moved.
And seconded.
Roll call.
Aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, aye. Koshai.
Capiello, aye.
Okay, excellent. Next on to select board member reports. Select person Hardikoff.
Let's see, the planning board brought the planning board was presented, I'll let Joyce expand on that, but with the housing committee master plan, we had a very, very, very busy zoning board meeting, and as you can see, there's some new in Barrington. And nothing was atypical of relief that would be provided to non-conforming lots. So I think there were 3 cases, if I recall correctly. So there will be many dilapidated buildings being replaced.
Excellent. Select board member Manshred.
Well, school board talked about the school board meeting. As said, we didn't talk about the joint committee meeting. There were some concerns about how fast we were moving from board members. They discussed that further at the school board meeting. Particularly concerned about a financial trigger, which I don't think we were thought about for the collaboration committee, but that happened.
Very interesting.
They wanted to, there was a question of whether there should be a financial trigger for what is discussed at the collaborating committee. That was my response also. But that's what they discussed. They want to have limit of what we can do financially at the collaborative committee.
An upper limit or a lower limit?
I assume it's an upper limit.
Oh, okay. So that the committee doesn't consider any collaboration that is valued any more than a number. Did they mention a number?
No, and I don't think it was a firm commitment. It was just one of the discussions they had. The library trustees, you got their report. This is really easy. And the transfer station committee met on Monday while I was off doing immigration stuff, so I don't know from that meeting.
Excellent. Select person Capiello.
Yes, so the planning board met last week, and probably the one of most interest to residents is the Young Road subdivision, which came back for a conceptual review, and they redesigned that project. It remains a 23 house lot, but with 3 road cuts rather than the 10 to 14 that were proposed. So there would be 1 road cut with 3 houses, 1 with 2 houses, and then 1 with 18 houses. And it was received favorably by the board, feeling like the developer had listened to the concerns of the planning board, and the storm drainage plan would now apply to the entire subdivision and not be subject only to the homeowner. So that will come back as a specific project for planning board to review and vote on. I don't have my notes with me on the other projects we reviewed. The housing committee report was presented by Stratford County Regional. We did have one resident who questioned the fact that there was a lot of data there, but the data was not sort of pulled together to present stronger themes and thus could be used for recommendations.
Excellent.
And that's all I have to present.
If I may,
Go ahead.
kudos to Select Person Capiello, who is on the meeting at 2:30 a.m. local time on a vacation, maintaining her commitment. I know there's feedback about select board members needing to miss recent meetings because of other commitments, which happens. We're all, we have working professionals on the board, which is terrific. Select Person Capiello is so dedicated to her role on the select board that at 2:30 in the morning in a foreign country is doing the good work of on behalf of Barrington residents. So kudos to you, Select Person Capiello.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And since I'm on vacation, I can sleep in tomorrow.
Get some hours for me, please.
Vice Chair Gibson. So last week on May 8th, the Energy Committee met. Actually, it wasn't the Energy Committee, it was the public session. Everybody should have received a mailing from Community Power. This was the warrant that was voted on at town meeting. It should go into effect in June, and this was a public hearing just to solicit any questions and feedback from the town. There was about 15, 20 people in the audience here in this room. One of the things that had come up were suggestions about, for some of them, they claimed that this paper mailing was the first they had heard of it. And so, as much as the Energy Committee tried to educate and get the word out, there's possibly some ways for better communication. Explore. The Energy Committee meets this Thursday at 7, and the Library Building Committee also meets this Thursday at 5. And there are no other meetings to update on.
Excellent. Sounds like you have a busy Thursday.
Yep.
Excellent. Rec Department, obviously you heard about the grant that they received, so exciting news on that. This past Saturday was the Fishing Derby, which they had a great turnout. Right now, the Rec Department is gearing up for summer camps, in addition to adding some specialty camps that include fishing, flag football, and baseball. And that's what's going on at the Rec. For the Technology Committee, we have a turnover happening for the programming. When is that going to happen?
That's a good question. On May 17th.
May 17th. That was the date I was looking for. And that's all I have.
One other quick library thing. Thank you, Tracy Hardikoff, for, on behalf of the Select Board, putting together a Bloom and Book presentation for the library fundraiser. Another thing that was happening on Saturday.
Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Tracy.
Very busy day in town. So
yes, it is.
Your book was one vote, two vote, I vote, you vote. Thought that was an appropriate one for the select board.
With one of the I voted Dr. Seuss buttons, which was donated by the same select person for the Barrington Kids vote.
Okay. All right. Thanks, board. With that, it's going to bring us up to our second public comment session of the meeting. Each member that comes up has 3 minutes, up to 15 minutes long, for everybody in the room and online. And note that this is not a two-way dialogue between the select board, and I ask everybody to please be respectful to others. So if there's anybody in studio or online that would like to come up and make a public comment, now would be the time. And we know who you are, but if you could please state your name and where you live, that would be great.
Run St. Jean, small road, that road that Tracy was talking about, where most of us have septic running under the road. Most water bodies that are public for recreational use suddenly become considered private when something goes wrong, like an infestation. The state drops their responsibility and leaves it up to the homeowners that live around those water bodies to fund remediation, which is crazy and unsustainable. Most of us that live on water bodies are not living on Winnipesaukee, and we can't fund those kinds of things at $1,000 an acre every year. It would be great if the select board can get together with your contacts in the state government and come up with some kind of plan for funding the remediation for water bodies statewide that have infestations. It can't be left to the homeowner. I know when there was a invasive knotweed in the very same road that we're talking about last year, the town took care of that. The homeowners along Daniel Cater Road didn't have to pay for the knotweed to get removed. The same should be true for an invasive species in the lake. I think we're at greater risk of financial difficulties because of this vote, but there are reasons for the vote. I understand that. More usage means more risk. But I hope you can work out something where this responsibility can be shared among all the people that use these water bodies, not just those of us that are lucky enough to live by them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Anybody else in studio online? Come on up.
He's spoken.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hang on. Point of order?
Yep.
Public comment does not allow a second public comment from the same individual.
Okay.
And my only concern is not just applying that.
No, and before, so sorry about that.
You guys are all set. I would urge you guys to research that capital reserve fund.
Anybody else in studio or online?
If you're online, you can raise your hand, or if you're participating on a phone, you might have to press *6 to unmute yourself. Wait to be recognized by the chair.
You can come on up. Well, in your group, so.
So I can't speak again, is what you're saying?
Correct,
No,
since you've already spoke,
someone.
but somebody else from your group can. Come on up, please state your name and where you live.
Barbara Feldman, over on Pine Road. I think Tracy was referring to a quote for the roadside mounting kit for cleaning boats. And it was an exorbitant amount of money that you quoted. This quote on this sheet of paper says $2,629. So would you like a copy? Shall I share this or? Yeah.
2,000. Go ahead.
$2,629. And yours was, I forget, over $1 million.
Yeah, it was in Minnesota, and that particular install was $1 million.
Please feel free to send that to Connor's email.
We will follow. We'll follow up on it. But thank you. It needed clarification. Thank you.
Anything else while you're up?
Okay. Yeah, I spoke to Dan about this too, and I'm all for. I think education, signage, all of this stuff kiosks are a really great idea, and would definitely support trying to find ways to support that kind of.
Oh, and you know what? I'm going to apologize. This was 16 installs across Minnesota lakes. So $1 million divided by 16.
And I think there are different varieties. The state employs similar technology as a mobile clean, drain, dry station that they bring to different boat launches. It's like a trailered unit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same manufacturer, but I think this flyer is for a smaller version of that.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think I have directed from the select board to look at kind of a central clean, drain, dry station for all of our lakes. So I'll report back on that, including cost data from that, as will be shared with me.
It would seem to me if you're cleaning at the boat launch, you're just moving the stuff out into the water.
Agreed.
Because it has to drain somewhere.
This is a waterless version, though, that he's suggesting, and if we really.
Excellent. All right.
Something to
Anybody else in studio online that has not spoke yet in public comment, please make your way up or raise your hand.
My name is Maureen Sawicki, and I live at 24 Sunset Drive in Barrington. I guess this is a question that I have. I walk that road a lot, and I notice all of the signs that are up that mark the conservation land that Camp Fireside had put in quite a few years ago, had entered into that agreement. Does any of this boat launch or parking or any of that impact that grant that is still there, that land that's supposed to be for conservation? That's my question.
If the board wants to suspend the rules, I'll answer, provide the same information that was provided earlier in the meeting. So to the question about.
Motion to suspend the rules.
Yeah.
Second.
Yes.
Sakosha.
Hardikoff, aye.
So the road is not impacted. So all of the parking and the town's road right away extends many feet into the water. What in the town administrator report, which is available online, you can see the details in an image, which shows the conservation easement line, which crosses the lake. It's about 15 or 20 feet from the edge of the water where that launching area is now. The conservation easement line is shown. And so there's a section of the land underneath the lake in about 2 feet of water that USDA shows as on their conservation easement is owned by Camp Fireside, and they hold the conservation easement. And so none of the other project is within the easement area per se. So that there isn't yet a determination of exactly where that area is or agreement about how far the town's road right-of-way goes or where the state's ownership in public trust of the land or to the high water mark and the land under it is. So the question to USDA, who holds the conservation easement, is people are currently backing their boats and trailers once they get that kind of 15 feet out onto that patch of land under the lake in about 2 feet of water now. And it's just raw lake bed that they're driving back and forth over. The proposal is to replace that raw lake bed with concrete planks. And so regardless of getting to final answers about exactly how far the town's roadway goes and exactly where the high water mark is and exactly who owns that land, if we assume that it's as presented in the easement plan, is it better for the protected area to have boats or cars and trailers driving on that unprotected lake bed, or to have boats and trailers driving on concrete planks? And that's the question that we don't have the answer to yet. But certainly there will need to be an answer because right now Camp Fireside, kind of through them, are claiming ownership to that patch of land that's underwater and that's within the project area. So that will have to be resolved somehow. How, I don't exactly know, but that's what I have presented to them as for consideration.
Before this can go ahead, that has to be agreed upon.
Something will have to be resolved. Yeah, I don't know exactly how it will be resolved. I think the point of contact at USDA was unfamiliar with the kind of nuances, and the information that she's waiting for right now is some additional guidance from her kind of federal partners, and then also the specific language of the water rights that the state owns in that area. The dam was originally installed back in like the 1800s, and it was installed with easements over the private property that existed at the time. And so far we haven't, both the town or USDA or others that are trying to track it down, haven't found that exact easement language, which might also be helpful. So yeah, I don't know how it will be resolved, but it will need to be resolved somehow. Kind of the best information.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, if there's anybody else online or in studio for public comment who has not yet spoke, please make your way up or raise your hand online. Okay, with not seeing any movement in here online, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Yeah, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairperson, motion to adjourn, please.
Second by Dannon, roll call.
Too long.
Yes.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gibson, yes.
Sakosha,
I actually don't have her name.
Gabriella, aye.